All right, welcome back everybody for another deep dive. Today we're tackling Terry Pratchett's Discworld.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Big one.
huge, right. But here's the twist.
Okay.
We're only using one source,
All right.
just one review of the very first book, The Color of Magic.
Interesting.
So the question is, can this one review
Oh, yeah.
convince you, the listener, to pick up the book?
All right, I'm intrigued.
Let's find out, huh?
Yeah.
So the reviewer, they start off,
Okay.
and they admit they were entertained, sure,
Mm.
but also a little baffled
Oh,
by the book.
so they're saying intrigued, but like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Like, what is this world?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, have you ever...
Well, that's the thing about Pratchett, right? It's just so unique. Discworld,
Yeah.
it's not your typical fantasy setting, is it?
No, not at all. We're talking a flat disc,
Right.
balanced on the backs of 4 elephants,
Yeah.
standing on a giant space turtle.
Makes sense. Like, what?
That's as wild as it sounds. Yeah, totally.
It definitely is.
So, not in Kansas anymore, Toto.
No, not at all.
The reviewers actually even mentions they specifically chose this book, The Color of Magic,
Right.
because it's the first one,
Ah, okay.
even though they'd heard it might not be the best place to start,
I see. Yeah.
which I think is really interesting for our listeners.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely, yeah. If you're thinking about getting into Discworld,
Yeah. Is this where you want to start?
it might be an interesting tidbit to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, man, starting with the first book in a series, I mean, sometimes it's great.
Yeah.
Sometimes, the author's still figuring things out.
Finding their feet a little bit, yeah.
Exactly.
It's like you think about like a band's first album, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not always their best work, but it's often got this kind of raw energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting to see
Totally.
how it all began.
So let's talk about the characters.
Okay.
This review, I mean, obviously they go into the characters a bit. The first ones that they talk about
Yeah.
are Rincewind the Wizard and Two Flower the Tourist,
Okay.
the protagonists.
Right, right.
And they say they found them likable,
Okay.
but a little lacking in depth.
Okay.
Is this a Pratchett thing, or?
I mean, it's interesting because I think, especially with Rincewind, there's definitely more to him
Yeah.
than meets the eye, right? He might come across as this
Yeah.
bumbling coward.
Subtle wimp,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of.
But underneath, there's a real cunning and wit there. Two Flower, on the other hand, I think he's much more like an archetype, that innocent abroad.
Right, the tourist.
Yeah, wide-eyed, sees the best in everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will say this about Two Flower. His relentless optimism
Yes.
really fuels the humor and drives the plot forward.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's infectious, really.
And speaking of quirky characters, we've got to talk about the luggage.
Oh, yeah.
Two Flower's sentient suitcase that follows him everywhere.
Yeah,
And it often has
right.
hilarious, but also kind of unsettling
Oh, totally.
consequences.
Yeah.
The reviewer loved this detail.
Who wouldn't?
A walking, talking chest
It's brilliant.
that just eats
Yeah.
enemies.
Yeah, devours them whole.
I mean,
It's pure Pratchett.
pure Pratchett, right? What do you think about?
Well, it's like he takes these inanimate objects
Yeah.
and he gives them
Yeah.
this personality, this life.
Yeah.
It's not just a funny gimmick, though, right?
Right.
It actually adds this layer of absurdity to the world
Mhm.
and makes you kind of look at your own
Yeah.
relationship with everyday things a little differently.
Yeah, like, is my coffee mug judging me right now?
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so the reviewer did have some mixed feelings about Liesa.
Okay.
She's the only prominent female character
Ah, right.
in the book, at least that we know of from this review.
Hmm.
And they said she was underdeveloped.
Okay.
And, well, let's just say
Yeah,
her outfit
right.
left little to the imagination.
I see. This is where you see some of those classic fantasy tropes
Yeah.
coming through.
Yeah, which we know aren't always
Yeah.
the best,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to female characters.
Not always kind to them, no.
Well,
But it's interesting because in Pratchett's later books,
yeah.
he does write much stronger, more nuanced
Yeah.
female character.
Yeah, so
But
maybe this is just him early on.
maybe it's more product of the time.
Yeah, finding his feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now on to the plot.
Oh, right.
The reviewer described it as meandering and directionless.
Mm.
Now, most of the time, I feel like that's not really
Not a compliment.
a good thing.
Right.
But with Pratchett, maybe it's intentional.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
He's subverting those expectations.
No.
The meandering plot allows him to just throw in all these crazy encounters and absurd situations, which is where the humor really shines through.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a comedic road trip
Yeah,
through a very bizarre landscape.
totally. Yeah.
You never know what's around the next corner.
And speaking of absurd situations,
Yes.
this review highlighted a dragon scene
Okay.
that completely flips the traditional dragon mythology on its head.
Interesting.
So, without spoiling it for our listener,
Right.
what can you tell us?
Well, let's just say that Pratchett's dragons,
Yeah.
they're not what you'd expect.
Okay.
They exist within this very unique
Yeah.
ecosystem of Discworld
Yeah.
where magic and logic, they
Yeah.
kind of collide in the most unexpected ways.
Right. Yeah.
A perfect example of how he takes something familiar,
Yeah.
like a dragon,
Yeah.
and just makes it strange
Yeah.
and hilarious.
Totally. So, the reviewer, we're wrapping up here.
Okay.
Quirky characters, meandering plot,
Right.
wildly imaginative world,
Yeah.
lots of humor. Seems like a pretty good
Seems like a good time.
time, right? And most importantly, I think the reviewer is intrigued
Yeah.
enough to continue the series.
Oh, that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that says a lot.
It really does. I mean, it sounds like The Color of Magic, even if it's not the most polished introduction to Discworld.
Yeah.
It does offer a glimpse
Yeah.
into this unique blend of humor, satire, and just fantastical world building
Yeah.
that makes Pratchett so beloved.
And that's really, I think, what we wanted to get to
Yeah.
today in this deep dive is, so now,
Yeah.
you, the listener,
Yes.
would you be willing to brave this meandering plot, maybe some underdeveloped characters,
Yeah.
for a chance to experience Pratchett's humor? An utterly unique world.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a big question,
It is.
and one that only you can answer.
You got to decide for yourself.
Yeah, the choice, as always, is yours. But we hope you make the right decision. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.